Hello again. My name is John Stanley, and I'm here to talk to you about some things about recovering from a stroke. Um, I'm not a really funny person. I Even when I was a minister and I was talking every week, I seldom told jokes because the funniest things about jokes is me explaining to you why it's funny. And of course, if you have to explain it, it's not very funny. And so I never was much of a joke teller. But I kind of am funny because I love to see myself in strange situations where I am in a bit of a pickle, and so that's what I'm going to share with you today is some of the places where I had really strange experiences during my stroke recovery that I think are funny. You'll get to decide that for yourself. One of the first that I want to tell you about. I'm going, after I'm finished filming this video, to meet several of my friends, and we meet together every 2 weeks, and we have met together for 35 years. I went off and lived in Canada for several years, and when I came back home, we started meeting again, and we started meeting in the early 1990s, and we still meet today every 2 weeks. Well, one of those friends of mine, and some of you know him, and so you might be able to guess who it is, said to me one day, he said, "John, I hear all these people talking about you getting back to 100%. He said, "I knew you when you were 100%, and you weren't that great." Well, everybody kind of needs a friend like that who can tell you the truth. And that friend of mine is like that. So we thought it was kind of funny, but it is also a little bit painfully true. And, you know, that's what I think humor is. It's two ways of seeing things. It's an incongruity. It's another point of view from the authoritative point of view. And that's why it's kind of funny. It's like the jester with the king. I was telling my wife this morning that one of the stories I love about the Stoics is that when a great Roman or Greek king led in battle, there would be a celebration when he would come back home, and that celebration was called a triumph. But one of the main issues, the leader of the battle, of course, rode in on his great war horse and all of his glory, and there was a slave that was on the back of his horse whispering in his ear, and the slave was supposed to say, "You are going to die. You are not going to live forever. There is a moment when you are going to die, and it doesn't matter what kind of triumph we've had. We need to have that little voice that is behind us that's whispering the other truth than the triumph." I'm a great believer in positive thinking and triumph, and I've won and I've lost, and I'd rather win. I know what that's like. But even when you win, you need somebody there to remind you that things are not always a triumph. But so I wanted to share with you what I think of as some of the lighter sides of a stroke, although there's not a light side of a stroke. It's a very, very serious thing, but we don't have to take ourselves so seriously. And so I want to tell you a couple of things that happened. Well, one of the interesting ones happened to me around January. I was still in a wheelchair and I couldn't get out. And one of the things that is, when I had my stroke, I lost down to 124 pounds. And so I was very near dying of malnutrition. And I was not conscious, so they couldn't feed me. And they had to put in a peg tube, a feeding tube. And at the time, I was limited to a wheelchair, and my peg tube had a long tail on it, and it had a valve, and it opened and closed, and you opened it to feed me with a large syringe, and then you closed it. And sometimes I would wake up in the morning and I would be lying in a pool of wet, and it was because my valve had come open and I didn't know it, and the contents of my insides, unless you're too squeamish about that. I had a physical therapist one time who said, I know that stroke victims sometimes drool, and there's a reason for that, because one of our automatic systems is swallowing. And those of us who have had a stroke, we actually have to think about swallowing. And sometimes when we get really involved in something or engrossed in something, we forget to swallow. And when we do, we drool. And my physical therapist said, you can drool on me, you can pee on me, but do not get that peg tube liquid on me. Never. And so it is a bit of an indignity to deal with. But anyway, one night I came in late at night, and I often drank a protein drink when I was so thin and weak, and I would drink protein drinks. And so I came in one evening and I was going to slam a protein drink. And so I did. And I was in my wheelchair, and I looked down and I thought, my God, I'm in a pool of white stuff. What is that? And I said to my wife, what is going on here? There's something leaking on the floor. And what I had done is I had drunk that protein drink and forgotten to close the tube, the feeding tube, and the protein drink was just going right in one hole and out the other and onto the floor. And I said, baby, would you give me another one of them protein drinks? That one didn't stick to my ribs. And so we love telling that. It's kind of like a skeleton drinking milk. It was just going all over the place. And we had a big laugh about it. Another time I was out of the wheelchair, but I was still using a walker all of the time, and I could not walk. And my wife was outside talking to a neighbor, and I was sitting on the couch in my living room in Harwood, and all of a sudden smoke started billowing over the couch. And I thought, my God, the house is on fire and I can't run away. What am I going to do? And I thought, the door is just right there. And so I can very haltingly stand up and just lurch for the door and get myself out. And one of my kind of desperation ideas is I was sitting there and I was like, I know I'm going to die, but I'm not going to die today, and I'm not going to die in this house from a house fire. I'm going to get out. And so I stood up, but the problem was, in addition to the peg tube, I also was using a Foley catheter at that time. And I don't know, medical people will know what a Foley is, but a Foley catheter is the kind you're thinking about. It's the kind that goes in your urethra. And so I had a bag, and I had just hooked it on the dog's cage, and I was watching TV, and all of a sudden this smoke started coming over, and I thought, oh my God, I'm going to die. And so I stood up, sure enough, and I lurched toward the door. And when I lurched toward the door, I got to the end of my catheter tube, and it jerked me back down to the ground. And I thought, my God, here I am in the middle of the floor, and I certainly cannot get up from the floor, and I've been jerked down here by my catheter, and I was hurting, and my wife came in, and she went over and got a piece of toast out of the oven and threw it in the trash can, and everything was fine, and the house did not burn down. Although when she came in the house, I was lying on the floor, and I said, in my best stroke voice, I said, the house is on fire! The house is on fire! But it wasn't. So that was another very odd experience. One of the other things I want to mention to you, I had a wonderful little 19-year-old physical therapist when I was in Harwood, and she always spoke real loud because she thought the fact that I had a stroke meant that I was hard of hearing. And she said, Mr. Stanley, you're real strong, but you don't have any stamina. And I thought, every man wants to hear that, especially older gentlemen. We want to hear, we're plenty strong, but we don't have any stamina. Well, the good news is my stamina is growing stronger every day, and it's doing much better. But I tell you these little weird things because I want you to know that from the darkest night, going into a coma in May of last year and waking up and really becoming conscious in September, how much I relied on a sense of humor to get me through, and it served me well. The science-based evidence is kind of, the jury is out whether humor contributes to people being in denial, or whether humor is a kind of protest that recognizes the incongruence of things and just says, I will not allow myself to be overcome by this way of seeing. There is another way of seeing as well. And so for me, I'm going to continue to have a good laugh and to be able not to take myself nor my condition so seriously. And whether it makes me better or not, I enjoy it a whole lot more. And so I want to encourage you to develop your sense of humor and not take yourself so seriously. You might find yourself at the end of a very short tether otherwise. Thanks a lot. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.